Only on Telesur.
From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Political turmoil continues in Peru. Pedro Pablo Kuczynski has announced he will withdraw his resignation as President of the Republic if the Peruvian Congress does not accept his terms. The Congress is debating his resignation now. Thousands of Peruvians have also taken to the streets to demand elections and the removal of all corrupt politicians.
Social movements march with the slogan, "Out with them all." For the protesters, Kuczynski's resignation is not nearly enough, because most of the political parties represented in Congress are involved in corruption or other types of crime.
It's been proven that all of them are corrupt. They're all part of the mafia.
A politician has to think about the country, but these people only care about stealing.
We demand elections. We want to get rid of this entire political system that has left us destitute.
For the protesters, the current social and political crisis stems directly from the 1993 constitution enacted by Alberto Fujimori. This is why they are also calling for a constituent assembly.
Our constitution is seriously lacking. We need to move away from neoliberalism, which has left us in misery.
It's a constitution that works against the people, the land, the nation, and our natural resources.
Whatever the final fate of Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, many Peruvians want a fundamental reform of their country's political system.
Let's go to our correspondent Jaime Herrera with more details from Lima.
It continues to be complicated here in Peru. The Congress passed a motion that President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski should be dismissed for lack of truthfulness, transparency, and honesty, and for betraying his country. The resolution is expected to pass to allow the current Vice President, Martín Vizcarra, to take the oath as the new Peruvian president. However, some lawmakers do not feel comfortable about this resolution, so before it is passed, it will be debated. Also, President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski tweeted that he is not going to accept this dismissal, and he could withdraw his resignation to undergo the impeachment process.
Now, the man expected to replace Kuczynski is his first vice president, Martín Vizcarra. He's expected to be sworn in as soon as Congress votes to accept the resignation. Vizcarra arrived in Peru early Friday and was welcomed by a crowd of supporters at Lima's Jorge Chávez International Airport. He was in Canada as ambassador to the country. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has unveiled significant monetary reforms. He is redenominating the Bolivar by knocking 3 zeros off the currency. The new monetary reform will become effective on June 4th. President Nicolás Maduro said this measure intends to protect Venezuela against currency speculators, and especially from the economic sanctions imposed by the United States.
On June 4th, a Monday, a new currency system, a new vision and currency system. It's already a currency redenomination, 3 zeros less. A new currency system to defend the Bolivar, and it will now be called the Strong Bolivar. I call for the defense of the Bolivar for all Venezuelans. There are those who want to have the US dollar in the Republic. No Venezuelan will not be a US colony. We will defend the Bolivar. We will defend the Petro. We will defend our monetary survival and the economy of the motherland.
Under the reforms, a 1,000 Bolivar note will now be worth 1 Bolivar. Venezuela will have 2 new coins, half Bolivar and 1 Bolivar. It will also have new notes that range from 2 to 500 bolivars. Currently, the largest note is 100,000 bolivars. Maduro also announced that citizens and companies will now be allowed to use the country's cryptocurrency, the Petro, to purchase real estate and pay taxes. People will be able to buy Petros using 4 convertible currencies in the world. They can also use Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XM to buy Petros. The president said they sold $5 billion during the cryptocurrency's pre-sale. Orders came from 133 countries, including Colombia, Spain, Argentina, and Germany. The United Nations Human Rights Council has passed a motion presented by Venezuela and the non-aligned movement, condemning sanctions and other coercive measures. The Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza tweeted, "The UNHRC approves our resolution condemning unilateral coercive measures. The arrogant attempts to dominate by the US and its allies are defeated by multilateralism and peace." And it's down to business for Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown. After a day of celebrations, Brown says he's ready to revive the economy. His strategy? Pumping money into infrastructure projects, which include a major road building program and expanding port facilities.
So we should see a significant amount of economic activities taking place. Environmental issues, we will certainly redouble our efforts, even the whole issue of transitioning into green energy. The project to acquire another 10 meg of solar and wind power, that project will be accelerated. So we have a series of projects that we will have as part of our priority for the first 100 days to the, let's say, the first 12 months of the new administration.
One obstacle to infrastructure building is the Land Act, which states the citizens of Barbuda communally own the land. That means residents must agree to major development programs. Brown says the island must move to a privatized land system if it wants to see progress.
The time has come for us to do some realignment and to bring Barbuda into the 21st century. And I'll say this without any fear of any reprisal from the Barbudan people. Even this carve-out that we have within the Barbuda Land Act, in which only Barbudans can buy land in Barbuda, that is unconstitutional. And I'm of the view that it ought to change. There should be one land act in this unitary state, and I'm going to give a commitment today that at some point we'll go to Parliament and we'll change it and align it properly. We did it because we're trying to endear ourselves to them. We've gone the extra mile, but the reality is Barbuda cannot continue to be a welfare state.
And on the streets of Antigua and Barbuda, optimism is high that Prime Minister Gaston Brown and the Labour Party will be able to deliver.
After the results were released, North Street was awash in red as supporters of the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party began celebrations that lasted well into the morning. And as a gift to his supporters, the Prime Minister-elect gave the nation a day off to celebrate his win. But for some people, work must continue.
I've been here for a few months and it's going good. I don't really have a problem. You know, doing business here, being self-employed is one of the best things I think I've ever done in my whole life.
Tourism is the main economic driver here. And while hurricanes pose a direct threat to the industry, Antigua has seen a rise in cruise traffic because neighboring ports are still recovering from hurricane season 2017.
The government need to step in and do something. It's like, I would say some of them don't know, some of them would know, but it needs a collaborative effort for everybody who is at stake.
Prime Minister Gaston Brown placed his hand on the Bible and took the oaths of allegiance, office and security.
So for the next 5 years, Gaston Brown and his Antigua Labour Party will be responsible for steering Antigua's economic and environmental development. So, reporting here in St. John's, Antigua, this is Saini Gray for Telesio.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Brazil's Federal Supreme Court has delayed a decision on whether former President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva should be jailed if he loses an upcoming appeal. Lula's appeal against a 12-year sentence for money laundering and corruption will be heard on Monday. This will be at the appeals court in Porto Alegre. If he loses that appeal, his last hope would be the Supreme Court, which has the ability to grant a habeas corpus, which simply put is the right to remain free. The Supreme Court will reconvene on April 4th. Chile will finish its arguments in The Hague at the International Court of Justice in the maritime dispute filed by Bolivia. On Thursday, during the first session, Chile said they were not willing to negotiate the 1904 treaty. Chilean lawyers will continue to argue that they have no obligation to negotiate with Bolivia, according to their interpretation of international law. The people of Honduras are questioning a series of reforms and legal measures, which they say favor corruption and impunity. They claim the Organization of American States, whose aim is regional solidarity and cooperation, is in fact undermining transparency in the country.
Civil society leaders in Honduras have expressed shock and anger after Honduras Supreme Court deemed the accord between the government and the OAS, Support Mission Against Corruption, to be unconstitutional.
What's been happening across Honduran society over the past few months, and mainly in the northern regions, it's a counteroffensive by corrupt individuals against a movement that fights corruption.
Even though the support mission is part of an agreement with the OAS, those with knowledge of the matter point out that Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the OAS, has given a helping hand in fostering corruption.
What's more, we have to wait for a complete shakeup of the support mission, spearheaded by Almagro. Unfortunately, he's shown an erratic attitude when it comes to the mission, at a time when the fight against corruption is of the utmost importance.
The Supreme Court has also freed former lower house representative Lena Gutierrez, who was linked to a Social Security embezzlement scandal.
We're
not surprised by such a disrespectful development, disrespectful of people's life, who have had to suffer thanks to shortages at the Honduran Institute of Social Security.
We are painting a picture for Hondurans and for the world in general that shows our government rewarding corrupt individuals and those in power.
Non-governmental organizations fighting against corruption say that the government wants to create a climate of generalized impunity that will favor all of those in power.
Now, more than ever, we can see that corruption originates in Congress, and that's always been the case.
To protect corrupt individuals, the majority in Congress changed the law to stop the seizure of assets belonging to those accused of criminal activity.
And there appears to be progress in Colombia's peace process as the government and the National Liberation Army resume peace talks.
Ecuador was again the stage of peace talks between the National Liberation Army, ELN, and the Colombian government. They resumed officially the fifth round of peace talks in the symbolic act.
We have reasonable hope that we will be able to move quickly in rebuilding a new agreement due to the experiences that have already been collected in the verification mechanism.
Both negotiators announced 5 main points in a joint statement, which are to renew the bilateral ceasefire, make humanitarian agreements in the Choco, to demine the borders, and to work on the pedagogy process toward Colombia.
This is an effort on the part of all states and of all organizations of society and peoples to build other ways of fighting against this problem.
The Ecuadorian Foreign Affairs Minister Maria Fernanda Espinosa was also in the symbolic act, who made a call to preserve the peace in the region.
I would say, if I'm not mistaken, that the most extensive cycle that goes until May 18th speaks very well of the commitment of both parties.
Brazil, Chile, Cuba, Ecuador, Venezuela, as the guarantors of this negotiation, also submit a statement in which they welcome the beginning of the peace talks and highlighted the work of both delegations. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
Hundreds of people have taken to the streets in Mexico City to protest against the disappearance of several students in the state of Jalisco. The governor of Jalisco tweeted that one student, Carolina Gonzalez, had been found alive and that the authorities would explain the circumstances shortly. He said they continue to search for 4 others. Indigenous people from the center of Mexico are demanding respect for their water reserves. They say big cities have been claiming their water resources from rivers and fountains for decades.
Residents of Villa de Allende municipality in the state of Mexico walk many miles to take water to their homes.
We use donkeys and buckets. Sometimes we rent cars to bring water. Can you imagine? We pay to carry water.
They've never had a water service. They believe that the government forgot about them when the Cutzamala system building started. It is the biggest storage, cleaning and distribution water system in the country. They lived like this for more than 3 decades. Families, and especially Mazahua women, must go to the river to wash their clothes.
The water we get is used for showers, so we gather our clothing and go 3 times a week to wash our clothing.
They are upset because the water reserves are shared with the Mexican capital, but they lack proper service. But the residents of Villa de Allende have not remained quiet. 14 years ago, they started a movement to defend their water reserves. They've been organizing protests outside the Cutzamala facilities. 30% of Mexico's city water comes from there, 100 miles away.
El agua no se vende, con la vida se defiende.
Our rivers were clean before this plant was built. We used to go to the river to fish and to eat. We had a little lagoon there. Now we have to go further.
They decided to mobilize until the National Water Commission fulfills its promises of repairing environmental and social damage caused there by excessive exploitation of water reserves.
If natural resources will be extracted properly, every community will have water. All of the 300,000 residents of this area will have access to it and productive projects.
Lack of water affects these communities, but also another 44 million Mexicans don't receive drinking water in their homes.
Social and environmental movements celebrated World Water Day with a protest in front of Coca-Cola's headquarters in Samambaia, Brazil. Demonstrators are protesting against the privatization of the Guarani aquifer, which supplies the water used to produce the famous drink. 35 million Brazilians do not have direct access to water, while another 60 million cannot count on clean water. Several activities took place in El Salvador to mark World Water Day. Salvadorians mobilized to demand the approval of a law to protect their water.
Churches, universities, human rights lawyers and the Salvadoran people themselves have allied to demand that the Legislative Assembly lawmakers quickly approve the General Water Law, a bill which has spent 12 years stuck in the parliament.
We recognize water as a life source and as a public good. Its access constitutes a fundamental human right, and which the state is obligated to guarantee in an equitable, efficient and sustainable way to all, without exclusion.
The little legislation regarding El Salvador's water allows transnational corporations and local private companies to exploit this resource indiscriminately. According to residents of Nahulingo in the department of Sonsonate, the Phoenix Construction Company lacks proper construction permits. One of their projects is to build a new housing complex. These new 700 houses will put their sewage into the Ceniza River, a water current that provides for some 2,000 people in 11 communities.
There are children and there is a significant elderly population lying in these communities near the river, and they utilize the river water for their domestic functions, and water sources that are close to the river are used by the people as drinking water.
The villagers took to the Ministry of Environment to demand the construction of the housing complex to be stopped due to the environmental damage that it will cause.
We are not here to fight for special interests. We are defending our community's interests, which is water. and water has to be clean and potable.
On May 1st, new deputies will make up the legislature. Most of them are from right-wing parties and have been widely accused by social movements of blocking the approval of the water law in favor of its privatization.
We'll take another short break. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia team reports. Welcome back. A gunman who took hostages in the southern France has been shot dead by police in the city of Trèbes. Before being shot, he killed 3 people. The local authorities have said the attacker is believed to be of Moroccan origin. It is also believed he pledged allegiance to the Islamic State group. France has been hit by several deadly attacks since 2015. Around 130 people were killed in multiple attacks across Paris in November 2015. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed off on plans to impose tariffs on China. It's a move that will hit imports on Chinese products worth $60 billion. Trump said China is still a friend, but the country is responsible for tremendous intellectual property theft that has caused huge losses for the United States. There are fears this could lead to an all-out trade war. Markets took a hit on those concerns after China said it is ready to retaliate.
China does not want a trade war and will not proactively provoke one. But we are not afraid of, nor will we hide from, a trade war. We are well prepared for it, and we will firmly safeguard China's legitimate rights and interests.
But trade tensions have cooled between the United States and Europe. Here's a look at that story and other global headlines.
The United States is temporarily exempting the European Union and 6 other countries from high import duties on steel and aluminium. Argentina, Australia, South Korea and Brazil will now be exempted, along with Mexico and Canada. Experts say this suggests US is tempering its protectionist trade policies and targeting specific metal-producing countries. EU leaders have welcomed the exemption.
We've been working very hard to secure an EU-wide exemption to the steel tariffs that the Americans have announced. I'm pleased that they've announced a temporary exemption for the EU. What I'll be working with my fellow EU leaders today on is to see how we can secure a permanent exemption.
US President Donald Trump has removed his national security advisor, H.R. McMaster. Replacing him will be the foreign policy hardliner John Bolton, a familiar face in the George W. Bush administration. Bolton has publicly spoken in support of war with Iran and North Korea. This replacement comes a week after Trump fired Rex Tillerson as the Secretary of State. Political analysts say Trump is reshuffling in his core advisors team ahead of upcoming talks with North Korea in May. The Philippines Anti-Drug Agency has burnt more than $50 million worth of seized narcotics. The stash was discovered during a raid in the capital Manila, during which 13 suspected dealers were killed, 100 others were arrested. The Philippines has been waging a bloody crackdown on narcotics ever since Rodrigo Duterte became president in 2016. The anti-drug operation has killed more than 4,000 people.
And with this, we've come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And you can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Telesur features the developments of science and technology that